conductive wire, and you were so electric. I had no say when you came so near and just passed right through me.
Hey everyone, welcome to Geekdom is Back. I'm your host, Deanna Chapman, and today I am joined by Murjani Rawls, and we are talking about not one, but two Blade sequels today. We will be talking Blade 2 and then Blade Trinity. At first, we were going to do 3 episodes on these movies, and then I went and watched Blade Trinity, and I was like, absolutely not. We're doing the sequels in one episode. But Murjani, how are you doing?
I am pretty good. As you said, like it's basically a tale of two movies where the initial sequel I thought was very good. Like I really enjoyed it. And then it was like the production problems and wanting to do a spin-off tanked the third movie. So rewatching these again, you could definitely tell the drop in quality as like you go on.
Yeah, I actually had not watched any of these before. I had probably seen bits and pieces because we had all 3 on DVD. So I'm sure my dad had watched them at some point, and I probably just caught glimpses of them. But I actually did enjoy Blade 2 just as much as the first one. And you obviously have Guillermo del Toro directing that one, and the visual effects I really liked, like, you know, the sort of gore and creature kind of effects, but this one also felt like it actually had a story in comparison to Blade Trinity that made sense. So basically it kicks off with this nice action scene. You get to see his nice car, and he is just kind of picking up where he left off after the first movie. And then Blade has to sort of team up with his enemy vampires to go after these mutant vampires. And they all kind of look like Palpatine.
Yeah, the Reapers.
Yeah, so it was just a sort of fun premise there. And, you know, I read online that some critics didn't like it because there wasn't enough character development, and I don't necessarily need that in this kind of movie. I think we got a lot of what we needed to know about Blade in the first movie, to where the second and third ones, well, less so the third one, but the second one didn't really need to advance his character necessarily that much. I think just putting him in this different situation where he has to work with these people, 1, he doesn't trust, and 2, he really just wants to get rid of, it shows that, you know, he's willing to do what makes the most sense to save the most amount of people. And obviously you have Chris Christopherson returning. You have quite a wild cast in this. You know, you have Ron Perlman, you have, who else do you have in this? Norman Reedus as Scud.
Luke Goss.
Yeah, Matt Schultz, Donnie Yen in this. Fantastic, even though he's not a big part of it at all.
I mean, I like Snowman. Snowman was the only person in the Blood Pack other than like Blade or something like to like beat one of like the Reapers hand to hand, which it should be because Donnie Yen is a badass. But
yeah, and you have Leonor Varela. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but she plays Nissa, who is essentially the daughter of our big bad Eli. And you have Nomak, who is the first Reaper, in a sense, who was created, and the dynamic with that whole family there, because she's the daughter of this mutant who is trying to take over the world and kill all of the regular vampires and the humans. And it's just such an ambitious thing. But I think because the action scenes look good in this, you have those great gore effects, it just all worked really well, and it kind of made you forget that, you know, Blade wasn't actually really the focus of this movie.
He was, but okay, so like rewatching these again, it's like the ideas in Blade 2 were much better carried out and almost tried to get duplicated again in Trinity.
Yeah.
Like, it's odd. Like, bringing Whistler back, you know, like, and then killing, you know, we'll talk about more about Trinity and like killing them off again, and then having the Blood Pack and, to versus, the Night Stalkers and Blade Trinity. Like, it's like everything got duplicated, but I think that one of the things that I liked in 2 is what you touched on, like the multi-dynamics of like what's going on. Cause like obviously Blade hates vampires, but, having to work with a blood pack against like the Reaper, which is funny because like, being in a pandemic and watching a movie like from back then that like talking about like pandemics in 2002 is a little interesting layer. But like there are different relationships because you got Blade, like when Blade and Nomak fight each other, Nomak is making the case like, dude, you and I are like on the same side. We both want to kill vampires. And you're like, yeah, like he's right. Like, you know what I mean? Like he hates vampires for a very specific reason, but at the same time, he wants to make everybody Reapers who are a mutant version of the vampire, which they can't really think. So like it's more zombified. Shout out to the character design in this movie too. It's phenomenal. Mm-hmm. Even down to how vampires disintegrate.
Yeah.
When they die in this one, it's much better in the sequel. But like even like the unspoken stuff between Blade and Misa, like I know they were like there was a deleted scene that Del Toro was talking about where it looked like they were done just like having sex or something like that, that they cut out. And I love that the connection between those two, or the affection, is more unspoken, especially it shows at the end. But yeah, then, there's a dynamic between bringing Whistler back and, could he possibly be a vampire? Him and Scud, because Scud is like the younger version of him. And also Blade and Reinhardt, who, because if you remember, like the Blood Pack was, trained to kill Blade, and now they have to work together. And it's just the chemistry between Wesley Snipes and Ron Perlman, where they obviously hate each other and they're plotting against each other to kill each other. But, them having to work together was fun to watch too.
Yeah, and the whole bomb implant, and then, Blade finds out, not necessarily finds out, he already suspected that Scud was a familiar and was working against him. So then you have that whole thing at the end with the bomb, and it actually goes off in Scud's hand instead of, in Reinhardt's head. And the way that they sort of focused on this taking over the world plot instead of Blade needing to kill all of the vampires, I think it worked well, because otherwise it would have just felt like the same thing over again. And like you mentioned, they kind of end up doing that in Trinity after this one. But for this one, taking that sort of different angle helped. And sure, Blade doesn't have as much character development as maybe he should have, but I think the fact that he cares so much about Nyssa despite her being a vampire shows a little bit of growth there from the first movie. But otherwise, these fight scenes were just like pure adrenaline, start to finish, and there were so many of them. I didn't really feel the nearly 2-hour runtime on this one, whereas with Blade Trinity, yes, there are action scenes, but I still really felt the runtime there. And we will talk more about that one in a little bit. But with Blade 2, it was just fun.
Yeah. What I really like about what Del Toro did is that not only are there good action sequences, especially the ones in the sewer. Like the sewer one, like it keeps elevating and elevating to the point where like they go and there's a fixed amount of time before daylight, and that doesn't affect Blade, but it affects the blood pack, and they have to go and like this horde of Reapers are chasing them, and then like the thing with like the UV bombs jam, and like it's a good showing of escalation, which I think.
And the other two try to kill Whistler in the sewers, and you see Nomak showing up and giving Whistler the ring, and it's just like nonstop, that whole section in the sewers.
Yeah, and I think there are really good horror elements to it too, especially, the first time that you see Nomak in the hospital, and like, what's going on? Or even in the nightclub when one of the Reapers bites Lighthammer, and he's slowly turning, and he's still kind of active in the group, but it's only a matter of time before he turns into a Reaper. So it's not that, because Blade is obviously, like, he's not overpowered, but like he's, you know what I mean? Like, he's it. But there's always like the constant threat against him. Whistler is older and he's kind of a liability. So like you have that going against you. Then you have like Nomak, obviously, and like his like horde of Reapers, and wondering like if some people in the Blood Pack are going to turn on him. Also, the whole like subplot with Damaskinos, and like why did he employ like the Blood Pack to help Blade? But there's this whole grand plot to bring him in. Like, it's a lot of layers that unfurl itself naturally, and like shout out to like David Goyer for writing that and working on that. But like it's a nonstop adrenaline rush, and it's a lot of layers to the story, but it's simple enough to just kind of like keep up.
Yeah, I liked that about it, because this was kind of one of those things where you could almost turn your brain off and still understand what was happening, which sometimes that's just nice with movies. You don't need everything to be, like you were saying earlier with the MCU, connected to something else so that you're constantly thinking about all these other threads. Instead, these three movies stand on their own. And, honestly, I am excited to see Blade back in the Marvel Universe with Mahershala Ali. And he's got some big shoes to fill, because Wesley Snipes is very good as Blade. And, we'll talk shortly here again about what happened next. But is there anything else you want to specifically touch on with Blade 2?
Yeah, just to kind of go off on what you said about Wesley Snipes, like he has and he builds upon it from the initial movie to now, because Blade is kind of like the stoic, keep on the mission, like not try to show so much emotion and things like that. But like in the first movie, when Whistler dies, like you can tell like that hurts him, that bothers him.
Yeah.
And also here, when Nyssa gets bit, and he takes her, up to the rooftop where she said she's never seen like sunrise, and they kind of like look in each other's eyes, and he like caresses her face as she disintegrates. Like that's another, instance where, it's like, oh man, like Blade isn't just, a hard ass like all the time. Like he actually cares about people. And just like the banter between him and the Blood Pack, it's fun. It's, you know what I mean? Like they constantly try to one up him, and he's always one step ahead.
Yeah, it was actually nice to have it end in a way where it didn't rely on Blade killing the big bad. Instead, it was, handled within the family, and then he had to kill Nomak instead. Yeah,
one of the things that caught me off guard when I first saw the movie, and then when I saw it again, is that the final battle between him and Nomak, because like Nomak only had the one weak spot, Nomak like has the upper hand in a lot of that fight. It's more of an even match, which I noticed. Like it's like I didn't come away. It was like, damn, like when Blade fought Deacon Frost, it was just like, oh, who's gonna win? Like Nomak like held his own until he found like the weak spot. That was pretty cool and unexpected for me.
Yeah, there were some wild shots during that fight too.
Yeah, and then Nomak was the one who killed himself.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, but yeah. It's unfortunate that like the movie didn't make as much money as they thought it did. It made $155 million.
But that's still good, considering the budget was around 55.
Yeah, you think in terms of like, I guess like you're thinking in terms of like what movies make now, given I guess like, the mixed things from critics. Like I thought, yeah, it it improved upon the first one, and like it made a pretty good gross. And then you have Blade Trinity. Which...
Yeah. Let's talk about this one, because still one that has a really good cast, but it just completely fell apart because they add Ryan Reynolds, Jessica Biel, Parker Posey to this one, and, you know, some other familiar faces here and there. Natasha Lyonne is in it, and it's one of those things where these people weren't necessarily at the height of their popularity. Like Ryan Reynolds got much bigger once he took on Deadpool and some other roles that just sort of launched him into the sort of larger than life figure. And Jessica Biel has done a ton of stuff over the years. Natasha Lyonne, obviously, you know, then went on to have Orange is the New Black and Russian Doll. So you have a bunch of people who are like kind of on the cusp of becoming who they're going to become, at least in the celebrity world. And it just, not only did it not work, it looked bad too. Like, some of the scenes didn't even look like they were from the same movie because of the way they were either color graded or just the lighting in them in general. But it looked like they put like 2 or 3 movies together to make this one. And I was reading something along the lines of, because of the tension between Wesley Snipes and David S. Goyer, a lot of the shots that are not close-ups were not Wesley Snipes, and you can tell.
Yeah, I mean, if people don't know the story about this one, Wesley Snipes was not really keen on the script and who they chose as editor. So Goyer actually wrote and directed this one, but there were times where like Wesley Snipes stayed in his trailer and, well, reportedly stayed in his trailer and just smoked weed, and Goyer had to like use stand-ins and like computer like effects to kind of add his character to the scene. So you could definitely tell. There's also like the infamous ending where Wesley Snipes wouldn't open his eyes in the shape-shifting scene, and so they had to computer impose eyes blinking, which looks really bad. Everything in Trinity to me feels like, as I said, what they did in Blade 2, but better. I mean, but worse, but a lot worse. Like, it's like,
yeah, it really felt like some of it too was like, okay, we'll just have Ryan Reynolds not have his shirt on, and that'll distract people.
Yeah, but like Ryan Reynolds here, I think, is like peak Deadpool.
Yeah.
In this movie. Like, he's doing all these one-liners, and some of them are funny, but like, it's like, if you watch this movie, it's like, oh, I see why Ryan Reynolds is Deadpool, because he's basically Deadpool in this film. Then, you have, as the big bad, like they introduced Dracula into it, and then you try to like the same thing that they did with Nomak in it, like Drake. He's not Dracula, he's Drake. He's, because, it's 2004, we can't say Dracula. And that, so he does the same thing with Blade, where he's like, human or cattle, and, we should work together. And it's like, I just saw this. and then in the beginning of the movie where they kill Whistler off again, like, it works great in the first movie because it drives Blade into that final act. You know what I mean? And then kind of in the second movie, because you don't really see Whistler die, and he, it's, so when you get entered in the sequel, you're like, oh, Whistler's a vampire, he probably got bit. You know what I mean? Here, it's like, all right, well, like, let's kill him off again. And I think they do the walk the F away scene again. I'm like, okay, all right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then, the whole like interrogation with like him and FBI agents, because they're familiar. I was like, all right. At the beginning of the film, I was kind of already, what is going on? Like, you know what I mean? Oh man. And like I said, like, the Night Stalkers, which is, they are out of the comics. Here they feel like just an offshoot of the Blood Pack. I know they try to shoehorn the Abigail Whistler character in, but like I didn't feel as though his death really impacted Abigail in the way that I would think. You know, like, it's like, dude, like, your uncle died. You know, like, I don't know.
And then the whole Zoe part of the storyline where she has to go save Zoe, and it's just like, okay, what are we doing here? Like, there were too many things going on for that finale, because they had to not only, you know, save Ryan Reynolds, they had to save the girl, and they had to get rid of all of the vampires.
Yeah, there's like that bioweapon they had to use with called Daystar. Then they found like that the vampires were using blood farms for humans, and I'm like,
and they just shut it down. Like, that didn't even go anywhere.
It was in the middle of the film, and I remember, I'm like, I've seen this in other, like, it happens down the road with Daybreakers, but I'm like, I think I've seen this in, I saw it in like an Are You Afraid of the Dark episode,
Yeah.
and like, I think Goosebumps, but like, I'm like, I've seen this in other media, okay, like, yeah, like, they're using like brain dead human, but this should be a bigger deal, and it didn't. Like, it was like, all right, we shut it down. Oh man, like Drake, who also is like a daywalker, is still out there. We have to go kill him. It's like they remembered.
Yeah.
And I'm like, they're trying to shoehorn. It's got like the Amazing Spider-Man 2 syndrome, where they try to shoehorn in so much to like lead to eventual sequel. And I think that's why one of the reasons like Wesley Snipes is upset, because everything, especially towards the middle of like the second and third acts until Blade comes back, and he's like, oh man, I have to work with another team again. What the hell? Everything is kind of focused on the Night Stalkers because it's setting them up for a movie.
Yeah, it wasn't fantastic.
Patton Oswalt is in this randomly.
Yeah.
Triple H.
You have so many people who should have made this movie better, and I think the writing just wasn't quite there. And you know this, Murjani, we don't love talking about things we don't actually like, but I feel like this was just sort of a missed opportunity, because a lot of the stuff that was going on behind the scenes, I was reading that Wesley Snipes would just leave Post-it notes for David S. Goyer and sign them Blade. Like, it was tense.
There were lawsuits, you know, Snipes, he sued New Line Cinema and David Goyer. Then the UTA sued Wesley Snipes for like fulfilling agreements. It was a mess, and you could definitely tell that showed on screen, because it, you know, like the few times that Blade or Wesley Snipes is into it, you could tell that Wesley's just not into the movie.
Yeah.
I mean, there was like a spin-off that they were going to do. The original director wanted to do one bringing Stephen Dorff back as Deacon Frost. Then there was also talks of like an Underworld crossover sequel with Kate Beckinsale. But thankfully, well, okay, I don't hate the Underworld movies. I actually love the first one, and I like the second one. Then, you know, they have like all those sequels and a prequel and stuff like that. But that did not happen, and you know why? Because Blade's rights reverted right back to Marvel, thankfully.
Yeah, and they've obviously sat on it for quite some time, and I think it was because they knew, you know, a lot of people did love Wesley Snipes as Blade, and the first two movies, I think pretty much everyone I know who has seen them likes them. I do know one or two people who also like Trinity, but Trinity for me was kind of like a train wreck you couldn't look away from.
Yeah, that's a really good analogy for it.
Because then I was so focused on like figuring out like where the stand-in was for Wesley Snipes and like what went wrong with it. And yeah, it had a very distinct look to it that was very early 2000s, and I just don't think it worked because, like I was saying earlier, some of the shots don't even look like they're from the same movie. And that's not to say that every scene needs to look exactly the same in a movie, but usually there's some consistency with how a movie looks.
Yeah, and tonally, like, even when when Hannibal King and Danica Talos is like, they're having, which I think is funny because he making jokes to Danica, and because I think they were previously in a relationship. There are a lot of lighting distinctions in this movie. Mm-hmm. There are parts where it's really dark, and then like it's glaring when, you know, Blade and Drake are like talking to each other about like, you know, you and I are the same. Like, these are just cattle, and it's like really bright outside. Yeah, I'm like, wow, like, you know, whoever was cutting this movie was just like, okay, you know what, we just got to get it out. We got to get it out. It actually, despite all the issues, it actually made a decent amount of money. It made $132 million, which I was surprised about. It's
probably because people enjoyed the first two and they went, oh, it can't be that bad.
And it was. Yeah, there was. It's funny because there were two alternate endings that they shot. One was like teasing the Night Stalkers because they were chasing a werewolf. And then there was like this whole like the switcheroo between like the body and the morgue. Like, they shot two scenes, and obviously, like, you know, talked about the scenes where like Wesley Snipes wouldn't open his eyes. Yeah, it's just, and then the whole like, I don't know, that final fight, man. You know, you have to fight me with honor. I was like, what? Why is Dracula of all people, like, worried about like honorable fights? We've seen Dracula like throughout time. He's not about that. And like, it's weird. And then like Drake has like that weird form where he looks like, I don't know, like the Beast from Legend or something like that. Like, yeah, like the Tim Curry thing.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, man. Like, I know David Goyer was like working hard with all the limitations that he was brought, and especially the notes that he would get to like make this movie work. But it definitely seems like a Frankenstein.
Yeah, it is a wild movie, and I don't know if I can even recommend people go watch this one if they haven't. I might just say stop at the first two.
It's a quick movie. Well, no.
It's almost 2 hours still.
Yeah, it's almost 2 hours.
It feels almost 2 hours too.
I mean, I thought the Ryan Reynolds parts were funny.
Yeah.
And then there's the whole motif of like Abigail fighting vampires and like listening to trip hop on her iPod.
She has to make playlists to hunt. Was how?
Yeah, she makes playlists to hunt. Which I'm like, is this like blatant like product placement here? Like, you mean like
they needed those needle drops.
Yeah, they're like, you know, you can make a playlist as, you know, you kill vampires. It's funny because it's like it's a New Line Cinema movie. But if you really like desperately want to create a trilogy of films and you're a completist like I can be, I would recommend it. I think both of these are on Netflix right now. But if you also want to like have a pleasant experience with Blade in your head, Blade 2 is like a perfect stopping point. It's just like you can like leave it and like it's like, oh well, Blade, continues to hunt vampires in another place and things of that nature. So you could leave it there until they do the Marvel iteration, which apparently they're going to start shooting in the fall.
Okay. Yeah.
So they've already teased him in the second post-credit scenes of Eternals. You hear Ali's voice like talking to Black Knight. They really could have used him in Morbius. That would have been kind of a redeeming quality if they would have done a tie-in to whatever, and opposed to whatever the hell they did in that movie.
Yeah. There's definitely other vampire content you can go check out too in the meantime. Like, just to hit a quick recommendation from me here, I would suggest checking out American Vampire by Scott Snyder and Stephen King for the first trade, but then Stephen King doesn't stay on the run. But it's a fun little vampire story. It's actually pretty long. I haven't finished all of it. I've read the first trade, so that's the one I'm recommending. But Murjani, any recommendations from you?
Yes, vampires. I'm going to go ahead. Like, we've talked about this before, but the 1979 Salem's Lot miniseries is one of my favorite adaptations of his work.
I honestly just bought a Blu-ray of that.
There are some really eerie scenes in it, especially like with the boy like flying into like the window is like so well done.
Yeah, Danny.
Yeah, I've like sent you the clip of like, man, like so well done.
For 1979, it is pretty well done. And considering it was a TV thing, and, we have, just to note, the new Salem's Lot coming later this year as well. So that is something that might be worth checking out. And we kept this episode very short. I feel like Blade 2 was a lot of fun, but because of that lack of character development, there wasn't a whole lot to say about it either. But Blade Trinity was, oof. It was rough.
Yeah, Blade 2, like, Del Toro is a master, man.
Yeah.
Like, I wish that, like, maybe he would have gotten the third one to do, because, like, there's so many good elements of, like, horror and, like, sci-fi mixed into it, and atmosphere, where, like, the Reapers seem, like, like really, like they're scary entities. Like they're working, you have like the Blade aspect hating the vampires, but like them coming together because like the Reapers might wipe everyone out.
Yeah.
Was really good to based on. And then like, the whole like Demoskinos family legacy thing and why Nomak hated his father and what they wanted to engineer. Like it all came together. And then, you have Blade Trinity, which there, and I talked to you about this, about Morbius. The movie existed to tease other things.
Yeah.
And I hate when movies do that. Like when, you have a trilogy.
I still haven't even seen it. Like, I'm not going to go watch that in theaters by myself. It's not happening.
It's funny because, like, I felt the same things when I went to go see Morbius. Like, it's like, oh, okay. You made this movie because you want to, do a separate movie, or you want to continue a multiverse, even though Sony has now distorted it to what I don't even know.
Yeah.
So, yeah, hopefully, like, listen, Marvel can enter Blade into different things. Like, we have Moon Knight now. Mm-hmm. And hopefully we get Ghost Rider, and we have a team up there. They're doing Werewolf by Night. So maybe you can enter Blade there. And like this whole thing of, fighting vampires and like the darker parts of Marvel is cool. I don't know if Sony's going to play ball, which they should if you're listening to the Sony.
They should. Marvel makes them a lot of money when they do.
Yeah, like no way home. But, like play ball. But like and I think Wesley Snipes is coming back in some capacity, because how could you not? Like, you made that character. But Mahershala Ali is going to do great. Yeah, I am interested to see where they take that character.
Same. So that is definitely something to look forward to in the Marvel Universe, hopefully relatively soon. But Murjani, thank you so much for sitting through both of these movies and talking about them with me.
No problem. No problem.